Is justice really blind? Or do we live in a two-tiered justice system that judges its citizens based on their gender rather than the crime they have committed? What is the penalty for a teacher who has sex with a student? In America, most schools have eliminated their sexual education courses as being too obtrusive into the lives of students. These classes were meant to prepare students for the eventuality of having sex. But there was no eventuality for them having sex with their own teachers. Tonight, on Predator 101, we discuss a justice system based upon gender. We hire teachers to mold our children's minds and to keep the relationship with them above the belt and purely platonic. Most teachers can't find the time between creating a winning lesson plan and grading homework, but some find the time to have sex with their students. Case in point, Miss Christine Scarlett, a female teacher who had multiple sex romps with a male student and was sentenced to 3 days in jail. Did I mention that she also had the student's baby? She got off lightly because she was a woman. In fact, the male judge that sentenced her to those short 3 days empathized with Christine's plight. Then there was Mr. Timothy Mitchell, the male teacher in question, who was sentenced to 9 months in prison and had to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. Unlike his female counterpart, he had a female judge to preside over his case. And let me tell you, she did not empathize with his plight, although he did more for the same community than Christine Scarlett ever did. Question: are men judged more harshly in the justice system than women who commit the same crimes? I believe so. We reviewed over 20 top cases involving teachers having sex with their underage students from over 20 varying states. What we found out was that for every county that a woman was judged, there was a male teacher with the exact same crime and similar backgrounds judged more harshly. There were clearly a bias when it came to sentencing. Good evening, and welcome to the first edition of Predator 101. Our story tonight could more aptly be entitled A Tale of Two Teachers, both of which were charged with sleeping with their students, but both receiving 2 different punishments for the same crime. If that weren't bad enough, both of these crimes took place in the very same county of Cuyahoga, Ohio. Now, some adults believe it cute and others believe it's sexy for a young man to be seduced by an attractive female teacher. But how cute, sexy, or attractive do you believe it would be if it were your child? I would think for most parents who try to shield their children from harm that this will be no joking matter. Especially when you sent your child into the arms of a woman who sought nothing less than grooming him into an adult relationship. When we hear things like male teachers molesting female students, we don't assign an attractive nature to it. In fact, the only nature we assign to it is a very lengthy prison sentence. And if this offending male teacher should happen to get out of prison, he will brandish a sexual predator for life. But for some reason, when it comes to the affair of sex, we turn a blind eye to what has just taken place. We hear comments such as, maybe he wanted it, or that he was a lucky kid. What we found out about the female teachers in most of these cases is that the average age is at least twice that of the students they groom. We hear different definitions of the charge against the teacher. For the male charge is usually rape, and for the female teacher, the charge is sexual misconduct, having an affair, or sexual battery. In today's Predator 101, we have such a case. When a female teacher gets 3 days in jail for having sex with her student. Her name? Miss Christine Scarlett. A notebook, an ink pen. Those are the things you need for high school, not condoms for your teacher. The attractive new substitute teacher at Strongville High School began her sexual grooming with a particular student by proposing a novel incentive to her class of special education students. Improve your grades and win a dinner date with the teacher. Oh, did I forget to mention that the student she had sex with was a special education student? Now, no one says the contest was fixed, but the winner was a 17-year-old captain of the football team, Stephen Brannigan. The award for winning this contest was a dinner at the local Dairy Queen. Now, granted, a dinner at Dairy Queen may not be nothing special, but what happened afterwards was enough to melt his ice cream. In Christine Scarlett's car in the parking lot at that Westfield South Park Mall, Brannigan said a 36-year-old teacher wrapped her arms around him and attempted to kiss him. Brannigan then said, "Whoa," and pushed her away, and she started to cry. The two both eventually composed themselves, he said, then spent the next half an hour making out in that parking lot. That was in November of 2002, which began a sexual relationship that continued off and on for more than 2 years, with stolen moments at school, rendezvous in Scarlett's home, and culminating with the birth of the student's son. Now, let us compare and contrast Christine Scarlett's case with a male teacher on the opposite side of town in a different time period altogether. Mr. Timothy Mitchell, a teacher at Shaker Heights High School for 23 years and the coordinator of the school's IB program. Now, the IB diploma program is an international baccalaureate. IB is a worldwide nonprofit education program founded to give all students the opportunity to receive an education fit for a globalizing world. There are 4 IB education programs, all of which are intended to develop students' intellectual, emotional, personal, and social skills. Mr. Mitchell resigned in May, about a month after Shaker Heights police began investigating the case. Mr. Mitchell would be the subject of an investigation of having sex with a female student some 22 years in the past. If you enjoy the Men's Channel and programs like this, remember to do such things as give us a thumbs up. Let your friends know about this video. Donate to the channel. Buy books from the channel. All those things are up at the top in the description. Now, also, there's merchandise for the channel. If you'd love to buy that, we'd love to have you. Once again, thanks for watching the Men's Channel, and we'll return you to the program. The victim, who is now 32, a wife and a mother, said she worried about hurting the school, the community, and Mitchell's family, along with being subjected to questioning from police investigators. She says she decided to report the abuse decades later after receiving mental health counseling and after talking to a different Shaker Heights female teacher. The former student says, and I quote, "This teacher told her that she was shocked, horrified, and furious that a teacher had done this to me. She said, I recognize that her reaction of anger and disgust is one that a teacher should have." End quote. Now, the female student said she met Mr. Mitchell when she was a 16-year-old junior. She said she was seeking companionship from adults because she was an only child of a divorced parents and often found herself alone because she lived with her mother. She said her mother, who worked long hours and was never at home. She goes on to say that Mitchell spent time with her after school, sometimes for hours, talking about politics and baseballs and school. Mitchell would give her rides home, and the two spent more and more time together outside of class. She said that Mitchell spoke to her about his personal life, and sometimes brought up inappropriate and sometimes sexual topics. She said that he took her to an Indians game during her junior year. The following school year, she told Mr. Mitchell that she had a crush on him. She said, "I mostly thought it was cool. He wanted to spend time with me," she said. "I told him in the hopes he would tell me I was ridiculous, and that would dissuade me from thinking about him any longer in this sort of fashion." She said she realized that their relationship had grown odd. She stopped going to his classroom and stopped babysitting Mitchell's children. She later thought the inappropriateness subsided and went back to having long conversations with him after school. Mitchell, then 36 years old, told her that he would take her out again. So he took her to another Indians game on June the 7th, 1995. He bought her a beer at the game, then smoked marijuana with her afterwards. Mitchell then took her to University Circle Park and parked near the Cleveland Museum of Art, and they talked about sex. They had sex outside in a park. She ultimately graduated from high school 8 days later. 22 years later, after that sexual romp, Mr. Mitchell, now a disgraced Shaker Heights high school history teacher, will spend 9 months in prison for giving her a beer and marijuana and having sex with her in that park. Court reporters would label Mr. Mitchell, now age 59, as stoic during the hour-long hearing, even as he was led from the courtroom by sheriff's deputies. This would not be the way the female teacher would be referred to during her case. Mr. Mitchell's family members wept aloud at Cuyahoga County Common Pleas. Judge Nancy McDonald handed down her sentence. McDonald could have sentenced Mitchell to probation because he pleaded guilty to a third-degree felony child endangerment charge. He also had dozens of letters from friends, former students, parents, and others that spoke to his positive impact on their lives and the community. But Judge Nancy McDonald said she was swayed by the victim's emotional statements to the court, during which she told the judge she did not want Mitchell to serve prison time. Now, Mitchell will also have to pay $1,265 to the victim. Mr. Mitchell also previously agreed to surrender his teaching license. Now, let's go back, returning to our first case with the female teacher, and we find that the student that she had a child by, last name Brannigan, is pressing a custody case in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. Mr. Brannigan has sent warning letters to the Strongville schools and police department threatening a lawsuit. He accuses both agencies of negligence for failing to pursue criminal investigation of Scarlett. Mr. Lawrence Brannigan's, the student's father, said, "The school only asked my son's teacher if she had sex with my son, and she said no." He said that was the extent of the school's investigation. Stephen Brannigan thinks his case will be bolstered by X-rated photos of the couple snapped by his high school buddies. His teacher, Christine Scarlett, who was married and mother of a 9-year-old daughter by a previous marriage, was subsequently fired from her teaching job. Now, 10 months later, she gave birth to Brannigan's son. DNA tests show Brannigan is the father of 2-year-old in the case. Miss Christine Scarlett admits she had a romantic relationship with Brannigan, but insists nothing improper happened while she was his teacher. She said Brannigan was a willing partner. Brannigan's attorney, William Crosby, said Scarlett took advantage of a minor, but she's not the only one at fault. Steve was an innocent and naive kid, and a virgin at the time, with handicaps that his teacher exploited. Crosby said she stole his innocence from him. Brannigan's attorney in this trial posed a hypothetical question. How do you think they would have reacted had this been a male teacher having an affair with a 17-year-old girl? Now, the teacher would be in prison. That's what he said. At first, Brannigan kept quiet about his dinner date with his teacher. But a week later, Scarlett arranged for a second secret meeting with Brannigan at his friend's house and brought along a 6-pack of beer. Now, while at the secret rendezvous house, Brannigan's friend's father discovered Scarlett hiding in a bedroom closet and blew the whistle to Brannigan's parents. School Superintendent James Gray said he fired Scarlett as soon as he heard about the closet incident. And 2 weeks later, he called the Department of Children and Family Services to report Scarlett, which agency director James McCafferty confirmed. Now, school principal Gray denied knowing that Scarlett continued to see Brannigan after she was fired, that she gave birth to his child, or that she had made the date for grades offer to her students. He said, "I never heard of that in my life. Obviously, I'm horrified if that truly happened. Certainly, that would have been the highest degree of unprofessionalism. That is a very slippery slope when you start getting involved in a relationship between teachers and students." Now, in an interview, Stephen Brannigan and his parents became emotional as they talked about the repercussions of an affair. They said that someone at the school scribbled profanity on their son's locker. Classmates taunted him in the cafeteria. Teachers mentioned the affair in class. And a coach asked Brannigan what it felt like to have sex with Scarlett. Currently, Christine Scarlett now works part-time at a furniture store. When contacted by a news reporter, she said, "I'm just really shocked after learning that the Brannigans were intent on seeking civil compensation." Scarlett agreed to an interview this week, then changed her mind, referring all questions to her attorney, Eric Laubacher. She's mortified, really, and saying sorry about any pain or embarrassment she's caused to the family. And this is from her lawyer, Laubacher. But that's a far cry, he says, from having any legal liability. Scarlett denies being the aggressor in the relationship. She also denies she was fired from her teaching job, but said she left on her own accord after a teacher with better credentials replaced her. There's a lot of salacious details and smoke in this case, Laura Barker said. But I don't believe my client did anything illegal or that she could be held liable for. Scarlett has resolved the marital problems that led to the affair, and her husband supports her in the custody case against Brannigan, the lawyer said. Now, let's take a moment out to talk about those marital problems that she said contributed to her having sex and a baby with her student. On an episode of the Steve Harvey Show, Christine Scarlett told Harvey about the incident for the first time. She blames her failings mostly on moving to another state and being lonely without friends and family. She blames it on her husband, who she says was a workaholic. She blames it on a very troubled childhood and being a very needy child. She continues on that she believes that there was a very immature part of her, that this incident filled a void in her life. Now, let me pause here and remind you that in the #MeToo generation, that none of these excuses would be tolerated in a male teacher. She recounts how Judge Dick Ambrose ordered her to spend the next 3 days in the Cuyahoga County Jail, but spared her from prison time. The stint behind bars would be followed by 180 days of house arrest and 5 years of probation for sexual battery of her former student, Stephen Brannigan. From the bottom of my heart, she says, I am extremely sorry for hurting you and your family. Scarlett said, addressing the victim in common pleas court, I will always have to live what I did, knowing it was the wrong thing. The student, now 22, was at a suburban Strongville high school when the relationship with Scarlett began. She stayed with her husband despite the affair. The student and his mother explained in the court that he was unable to think through what was happening with the teacher because he had suffered brain damage at birth. His mother told the judge that she met with Scarlett at a school conference, explained her son's mental limitations, and had hoped the teacher would be helpful. She says, you knew he had brain problems. The student read a prepared statement in which he referred to the past 4 years as a nightmare for his family. He said, you should have been helping me because you were my teacher. You knew I had brain problems, and you were so much older than I. Before she was sentenced, Scarlett apologized to the student and his parents. She says, there's not a day goes by that I don't feel sorry. She said, her voice crackling with emotion. I should have been smarter. I should have behaved differently. I will always have to live with the fact that I did something wrong, Scarlett said. She also described her son as amazing. The judge told Scarlett she violated trust of society places in a teacher. You use the position to pursue your own desires, your self-interest, and power over a student. I believe that in cases like this, it is more about power than it is about sex, Ambrose said. Ambrose is also requiring Scarlett to register as a sexual-oriented offender and disclose her place of residence to law enforcement. As part of her sentence, Scarlett must serve 180 days of home electronic detention, complete 300 hours of community service, and make financial restitution for the student's counseling, an amount not yet determined. Christine Scarlett, 40, pleaded guilty May 11 to 5 felony charges, 3 counts of sexual battery, and 2 counts of disseminating obscene material to a juvenile. The charges carried a potential 17 years in prison. Judge Dick Ambrose said he ordered probation because Scarlett had no previous criminal record and has obligations as a mother. She has a 3-year-old son from the relationship and 2 other children with her husband. This court has no desire to punish the child who is the innocent victim of this relationship, Ambrose said. Now, if this was a determination of sentencing for a woman, then why didn't the male teacher also get the children exemption? Scarlett was then placed in handcuffs after Ambrose ordered her to begin her jail sentence immediately. He said the sentence was to remind her that violating probation could send her to jail for 3 years. Stephen Brannigan told the judge that Scarlett tricked him into having an affair to become pregnant. His words caused her to break down in tears. He says, you were not interested in what was good for me. I feel like I was used, and I was a stupid jerk for not realizing that then. Now, Brannigan's father, Lawrence, said afterwards that Scarlett got off too easily and that the justice was not served because Stronghold school officials were not held accountable. The 8th Ohio District Court of Appeals ruled later that the Bradigans lawsuit against the school district was filed too late and that Judge John Russo was correct to dismiss the case. We didn't want vengeance. All we wanted was that was right, Lawrence Bradigan said. They need to protect all the school's children, the girls and the boys alike. Here's a recent update on that case. From Cleveland, a fired high school teacher and the former student she had a relationship with have agreed to share custody of their 2-year-old son. The joint custody arrangement was approved Wednesday in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. The parents will alternate having the boy for 2 weeks at a time and divide holidays and vacation. Stephen Bradigan was 17 years old when he began dating 36-year-old special education teacher Christine Scarlett. She was married. The affair continued after she was fired in 2002. The child was born in September of 2003. He and his parents have a separate lawsuit still pending in which they accuse officials of failing to pursue a criminal investigation into the affair. Now, finally to the conclusion of the case of the male teacher, Timothy Mitchell. The former female student in question said of him, "I can see now that there was a tremendous balance of power between us," she said. "I can see now that he didn't give me beer and pot because he was cool and I could handle it, but because I would let my guard down." The two also had sex at Mitchell's apartment on June 19th of that year, but Mitchell was in charge in that encounter because she was no longer a student at the high school. Now, Mitchell told her to keep it a secret and shamed her into believing it was her fault for the encounter, she said. She said that she still had panic attacks when in the Shaker Heights area and had to leave a parent-teacher meeting at her son's school because they played a video about inspirational teachers. She said she had difficulty trusting her kids' teachers. Now, Mitchell apologized to the woman, his wife, daughters, friends, and the Shaker Heights community for what he did. He called the incident catastrophic and a catastrophic mistake. "It was my responsibility to make sure that this didn't happen," Mitchell said, "and I failed. I only hope that today is the beginning of resolution and healing for her. I hope that she will find peace." McDonald took issue with Mitchell qualifying the relationship as a mistake. "It's difficult for me to say someone is a good teacher when they engage a student, a minor, in a sexual relationship and plied her with drugs and alcohol," McDonald said. "You call this a mistake? It's not a mistake. This is a crime." But notice how differently this went even after the former male teacher took responsibility for his actions as opposed to passing them off on his childhood, his wife, or his loneliness. Now, please join us next week for another episode of Predator 101. Class is in session. For the Men's Channel, this is Charles Rivers. Thank you.